today's video is going to be about the writing section for Section B, Unit 3 GCSE English Language, and we are going to be exploring article writing. So just a reminder then, all of the writing sections and the writing tasks for Unit 3 can be divided into persuasion, so changing somebody's mind, point of view, moving them to action, argumentation, so putting forward a point of view about a certain topic, perhaps presenting both sides, a little bit similar to an exposition, and then instructional, telling somebody how to do something or giving them information about doing an activity or something, or changing their behaviour in some way. So we access these three categories through various text types. So we could be asked to write a speech, maybe a review. You could be asked to write a report, maybe a leaflet or a letter. You'd have to decide whether it would be formal or informal. And what we're looking at today, which is an article. Now always remember the WJEC like to trick us sometimes and not explicitly mention the text type, but leave it for you to decide which text type you're being asked to employ. So for example, write an extract for a travel magazine. As you can see, none of those text types are explicitly mentioned, but you need to know that that would be expected to be an article. Let's have a look at some past paper style questions. You might be asked something like, you have been asked to write a lively article for a school magazine welcoming Year 7 pupils to the school, giving them information and advice about how to settle in. So of course you can use your own experiences, your own knowledge of schools, perhaps the resource material, the stimulus material will be related to this in some way, so you would be expected to divide that into categories and make up advice and information that they would need. You would decide whether it would be positive, negative, or a combination of the both. You could be asked to write an article for a teenage magazine about recent trends in music, fashion, film, or any other aspect of culture. You may cover one or many of these topics. If you have several interests, or if you have a very niche interest, perhaps in a certain genre of music maybe, this would be a wonderful task for you to really utilise your own knowledge and bring in your own experiences. Or as it says, you could divide your article into the mentioned subcategories, and it gives you lots of scope there to write about anything you like. You could be asked, the travel magazine is running a series of articles for parents under the heading An Enjoyable Day Out for All the Family. Write an article recommending a place to visit and outline the appeal to the whole family. So they've been very specific here about the task and of course the audience. Again, you could use your own experiences of perhaps maybe your local area, or a day out that you had with your own family, or of course you could completely make it up. Perhaps there's a certain theme park that doesn't exist that you would like to recommend to them, and you could talk about the rides and the day out, that there are lots and lots of types of days out that you could explore here. This one says it has been proposed that the legal age to vote should be reduced from 18 to 16. Write an article for the Welsh Government exploring the advantages and disadvantages of this proposal. So of course this one, we can assume that the stimulus material would have at least some relation to this, but of course you'd be expected to use your common knowledge and your own opinions and views on this, and to outline them in an article. So article writing then. Now we've all been exposed to articles, we've all seen them in magazines, and we've probably most commonly seen them online, but of course we don't have these designs to hand in an exam. Of course we don't have images, we don't have formatting. Are we really going to divide our page into two columns? Let's have a look at how we can show the examiner that we know what the expected features of an article is, but in an exam condition. So here then is a template of an article that we could achieve in exam style conditions. So if we imagine that this is one side of A4 in your exam booklet, this would be the first side, and then any consecutive sides after this would not have a title and a stand first, but they would still have these subheadings and paragraphs. So let's have a look at what is expected for each section then. Fairly self-explanatory. The catchy title would be expected to draw in the reader and give some sort of indication as to what the article is about. We have something called a stand first. Now that might be a new word to you there. You might want to look on the BBC Bitesize website under the media studies section. They give lots of detailed information about features of an article in a little bit more depth than the English language section on the BBC Bitesize website. So as it says there, a stand first is a line that is punchy and attention grabbing. It further explains the article. So here you could elaborate on who has been interviewed for this article, or the viewpoint in this article, or what the reader is meant to deduce from the article. So we've got a title and then a further sentence that explains the article. As you can see then, we've got subheadings throughout our answer that divides the article into sections. This is a really, really good way to signpost to an examiner that you know that an article is meant to be fairly easy to read. So the subheadings should not be complex. They should clearly indicate what each paragraph is about. As always then, the first paragraph acts as an introduction, an overview. And as we move through our article, the rest of the paragraphs explore the topic in more detail, perhaps offering alternate point of views. And then the end paragraph obviously acts as a conclusion. So you might sum up the message of the article, you might tell your reader where they could find more information or what they could do next. So very similar structure in that sort of think five way, but we have these expected features. Let's have a look then at an example of a persuasive article. So here's an extract from an article that was attempting to persuade the reader to eat a healthier and more balanced diet. So pause it here and read through it. See if it has the expected features that I just explained, and have a look at particularly the language and tone that is used throughout. Okay, to begin then, we've got a short attention-grabbing title, Eat Right, Live Longer. Personally, I would have made that more clear to the reader. That was sort of a main title, if you like, but that was just a stylistic choice. The first paragraph then explores what the article is going to be about. So it's going to be outlining an investigation by Jordan McIntyre and why everyone isn't dumping the junk, as it calls it there. So why do people know all of this information about healthy eating but still eat junk food? So we've got an introduction that outlines what the article is about as a whole. As you can see then, we've got further subheadings that divide the article into clear sections. Fast food equals fat, short on time, and then eat yourself healthy. So very, very short, clear subheadings. If we look at the language used then, there are lots of language techniques used here to engage the reader. It's quite a lively and informal tone throughout. So even though it's a relatively serious topic, health, they've used an informal tone to engage the reader and to make this sometimes touchy subject a lot more accessible. So we've got things like finger-licking burgers. We've got some facts there. That the calorie count for the UK on average is 4,500 calories. And then we've got a rhetorical question: why aren't we changing our lifestyles? Then they go on to explore why that is so. As you can see, we've got more headings there that divide it into sections. In the bottom paragraph, we've got an expert here. It says Georgia Thomas of the University of Food. So you might want to include a quote from an expert, either from the stimulus material or reasonably made up. And then lastly, it rounds up the message and the purpose of the article. Again, in an informal tone, it says, Britain clearly needs to shift the stodge and fast. So they're using a relatively humorous tone. Obviously, it's best not to sound condescending and patronising in this way. When we're talking about something like health and eating behaviours, people can often disengage if they're dictated to. So this article has used many language techniques to keep the tone quite lively, quite light-hearted. And as I've said, there are various language techniques used throughout. I'm sure you can read some more if you have a closer look at it. Okay, engaging the reader then. Now I could talk about this endlessly. There are so many ways how we can engage the reader, but what is it feasible that you can do in an exam condition? So first and foremost then, the content. This is the fundamental piece of your assessment. What can you include? What can you reasonably make up? What can you use from the stimulus material? So making your content interesting and relevant to the reader is the very first step that you need to make. Making cultural references, so talking about songs or literature or celebrities, all the way through your article, establishes a relationship with them. It shows them that you have shared experiences. It's a really good way to show an examiner that you have a broader, more general knowledge of society and that you've digested the media around you and you have a general awareness of the world. Next then, we can use emotive language. Now we often do this naturally, and we've looked at emotive language being a persuasive technique, but it's also just a way to generally engage the reader. So you can manipulate the reader's response to what you write. You can control how you want the reader to feel by using emotive language. Now, I think this is often forgotten, but emotive language can elicit both positive and negative emotions. So it doesn't have to be feeling sorry for someone or sort of having a really negative response, a sad response. It can be really positive. It can be really motivating and uplifting. I think it's really important to remember that. We can obviously use figurative language. Now we might associate this more with creative writing, our story writing and our description, but they do also have a place in non-fiction writing. So similes, metaphors, puns, hyperbole, all of these can play a role in engaging the reader if they're used correctly. And it shows a really, really solid command of the English language if you can think of metaphors, for example, that have a place in non-fiction writing. Next then we can use facts and figures. Now of course lots of this might be in the stimulus material from the reading section, but we can reasonably make up facts and figures to fit the narrative of our article. Now it's really important that you're careful how you choose to present them. So you might want to take a fact or figure from the stimulus material and turn it on its head. So for example, 1 in 4 children are unhappy in school. So that makes us think, a quarter of all children are unhappy. However, if this was presented inversely, it also shows us that 3 in 4 children are happy in school. So even though statistics present the same fact, you can manipulate them to convey the message that you want them to convey. Inclusive language, again, we often do this naturally. This builds a relationship with the reader, makes them feel valued, included, and even empowered. So using words such as we, our, direct address, you, really, really work well to establish a relationship with our reader throughout. And then lastly, rhetorical questions. Now, of course, we can't overuse these, but these can influence the reader to reflect on the message of your article, perhaps their own behaviour, their opinion on a topic. You can pose a question that makes them reflect on anything that you would like them to do. This is a really good engagement technique because it stops your reader from being passive. They feel compelled to think about it if you pose a question to them. So as I said, these are just 6 things that I think are reasonably achievable in an exam. There are a plethora of ways to engage the reader. These are just some of them here. Okay, as I mentioned then, it's really important that your article has a title. It is an expected feature of an article. Just as a side note, in an article it would be called a title. In newspapers they are referred to as headings. They're pretty much the same thing, but we just use a different lexis. So crafting an intelligent and attention-grabbing title for your article shows skill, a great command of the English language, which of course is an examiner's perfect combination. That is what they want. So how then do we create an effective title? So first of all, puns can be very, very effective. Now, puns are often known as a play on words. It is a joke that manipulates meaning or homophones, and the tabloid media use this a lot and relatively effectively, I must say. So let's have a look at some puns that have been seen in the tabloid press. So here we've got Tiger Woods admitting that he is a cheater. And of course you've got the homophone there between cheater, as in being unfaithful, and then obviously cheetah the animal, which is a play on the fact that he's called Tiger. Okay. We've got poor Jeremy Corbyn. They've obviously spelled his name Corbyn. We've got Believe in Britain, a Brexit article there. Anton decked, poor Deck McPartlin was attacked, so he's been decked. There's our pun there on the name Deck. And we've got Flu York City, obviously reporting on an epidemic in New York. And then I like this one, tortoise theft leaves owner shell-shocked. So puns, I think, are really clever. They're quite hard to think of on the spot. But if they come to you throughout writing your article, they can be a really, really effective thing to include in your title. They can be quite sophisticated and they can show quite a high level of skill. Just while I remember, sometimes you can get really hung up on what your title is before you start. So if you can't think of one on the spot, sometimes it helps to leave some space, write your article, and then sometimes you can even pull a line out of the article that you've written and use it as a title. So please don't get hung up on a title if one doesn't come to you immediately. Move on and then come back to it after you've finished. Oh, I forgot about this one. There will be hell to pay. Poor Trump and his interesting hairstyle. Alliteration then. Hopefully we know what this is. This should be revision. So an alliterative title is when more than one word in the title begins with the same letter or sound. So words can be alliteration even if they don't begin with the same letter, but it's really important that they are the same sound, and we'll see an example of that in a moment. This can make your title catchy and easy to remember, and it often has a comedic effect. So let's have a look at some examples. Pasties, petrol, and the politics of panic. Nice plosive alliteration there. Worldwide what? Obviously a pun on the World Wide Web. History in his hands. And then Crocs can kill. Here's our example of alliteration where they don't begin with the same letter, but in this instance a C and a K form the same cut sound, so that is still alliterative. We can also use tripling. We should know then that tripling is a set of 3 words or phrases that combine for maximum impact. The brain actually remembers things in groups of 3. I don't know how many of you recite your mobile phone number in groups of 3, but that, for some reason, that is how the brain groups things. So using 3 words can make it really memorable to your reader. So for example, teenage life, the trials, tribulations and terror of being a teen. Obviously that one's being combined with alliteration. These techniques don't need to be used in isolation. Lean, clean and exquisite cuisine. Why we should all eat a balanced diet. Likes, comments and shares. The truth behind why social media is so addictive. And then lastly, walks, wags and serotonin. Dogs could be the key to happiness. So as I said, tripling like this again shows a really good command of the English language, and it's really, really memorable for your reader. A question. Now this one can be quite effective if done in a very skillful way. Posing a question to your reader in the title can obviously signpost your reader what your article's about. And as I mentioned earlier, a rhetorical question really engages them because it forces your reader to consider what you've posed to them. So let's have a look. Murder or my choice? Fast fashion or modern slavery? The truth behind your cheap clothing. So here we're asking the reader to consider whether cheap clothing is fast fashion or modern slavery, and obviously it's outlining that this is what the article is going to be exploring. Are you a keyboard warrior? So the combination there of direct address and rhetorical question immediately makes them reflect on their own behaviour. And then, who dies for your fresh food? Dangerous farming exposed. So there are 4 examples of really effective questions used in titles of articles. Okay, here is your task for today then. So this says, instances of cyberbullying have increased. Write an article for a teenage website advising your peers how to stay safe and happy online. Let's have a look at this task in a little bit closer detail then. Of course, we always think of PAFT before we begin. So purpose, why are we writing it? Who is our audience? What format are we being asked to use? And based on those 3 things, what is our tone going to be? So our purpose then, we are being told that we're advising. So the purpose of this is obviously giving advice to young people. This would fall under instructional writing. You're telling them, you're instructing them what to do or how to behave or how to feel. The audience then is your peers, so teenagers, people the same age as you. Our format, we have our text type in the instruction here. We are being told that it's an article, specifically for a website. And based on these 3 things then, our tone is going to be informal. It is for people the same age as us. We don't want to alienate them. We want them to feel engaged and encouraged to read. We could keep it quite lively. So it's advice on how to stay safe and happy. But of course, because of the nature of cyberbullying, we can also dip into a serious, more sombre tone where needed. So if perhaps you were conveying the consequences of cyberbullying, we can sort of dip into some of our sections being quite serious, manipulating the tone in that way and being able to change the tone throughout your piece. Again, at the highest level, that shows a real skill and a real good command of the English language. It's often done in a sandwich form. So if we want to present quite serious or distressing information, articles tend to sandwich it. And what I mean by that is starting with quite a light-hearted tone and talking in quite a lively way, followed by quite serious and sombre statistics or quite a sensitive topic. And then the last piece of bread then would be a more upbeat, lively tone. So a sandwich of informal, lively, more sombre and serious, closed with returning to the initial tone. It's quite complex and quite hard to achieve in an exam situation, but if you can do that, that would be wonderful. So that is your task for today. Of course, you can use your own knowledge, use the stimulus material to help you. You might want to start with talking about instances of cyberbullying, what it is. You could talk about what teenagers can do to avoid it, or if they become victims of cyberbullying, where can they go, what can they do about it? Are there any things that they can actively do online to cheer them up? Are there, I don't know, ASMR activities or mindfulness activities they can follow? Can they be creative online in some way? You could talk about celebrities and celebrity experience with cyberbullying so that your peers know that they're not alone in this. Okay, so the angles that you can take on this article and the sections you can divide it into are numerous. There's lots of scope here for you to take this article in whichever way you like. Have a quick look over the expected features. Make sure we lay it out properly on our page. Don't forget that you're using the same mark scheme that has been used throughout the writing sections. So we're still expecting that focus on punctuation, Year 11. We're still expecting that ambitious vocabulary. We're still expecting that varied sentence structure. So please bear that in mind as you begin to write. As always, please don't hesitate to reach out if you need support.